The ants are back. Can I get a thunderclap in the distance, please? Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay. It's even worse this time. They were in my kitchen this morning. As soon as I wake up, thrust into war with a bunch of ants. They found my bread drawer. My croissants are ruined. No! Man, it wouldn't be so bad if the ants didn't get progressively more intelligent every single time I fought them. I think they're up to the Middle Ages now. They're building small-scale trebuchets and ballistas. So, wish me luck. Wish me luck. We'll see where it goes from here. Okay, I've done my ant facts. I know them. I know them well. All right, so today we're going to be discussing Marshall D. Teach and his daddy, who, spoilers, is going to be dropping in 3, 2, 1. Are you ready for this? Okay. Is Rox D. XEBEC. All right, so, like, yeah. The craziest thing to me, and I think a lot of people, is that Oda just dropped that piece of information, like, out of nowhere, right? Like, I didn't even expect to see, like, learn a lot of stuff about Rox in this arc, but here he is, okay. And he's really a big part of Loki's backstory, that's fine. And I'm like, all right, cool, we get to see Rox's face, we get to see Rox's hair, we get to see Rox's, well, I mean, can't really see a personality, but we've already kind of known he was the kind of guy that would stab a child just because the child wanted to go and travel the seas with him, and just like, no, you're too weak. Ah! So we have kind of already gotten the vibe for that, all right? So, Blackbeard was born 40 years ago, 40 years ago, all right? God Valley, which was purportedly the location where Rox D. XEBEC was killed, defeated, sealed away in an iceberg 1,000 miles under the surface of the earth, something like that, right? We don't know. Actually, let's start with that. Is Rox still alive? And is Rox going to be relevant to this story, okay? Now, when I say is Rox still alive, I mean, is he still, like, is there's going to be something involving Rox's personality? Might even be his soul still lingering around, because there's been some theories about, like, ooh, what if the reason why Blackbeard can have more than one devil fruit is because he has the multiple souls? That was something that's been around for a while. It was that and the Cerberus mythical zone theory, but Shamrock kind of shot that one in the foot right there, okay? He's like, no, sorry, Blackbeard doesn't have the Cerberus zone. My sword has that. Good doggy. All right, anyway. So, multiple soul theory, sure, but whose souls? Yes, okay. Marco also mentioned during Marineford, after he did consume the Gura Gura no Mi and showed that he had 2 powers, Marco was like, oh no, it's possible for him. He has a really weird body. All right, and this was something that was also shown way in the flashback when the Whitebeard pirates clashed with the Roger pirates, and Shanks and Buggy were kind of like observing Marshall D. Teach. He had yet to become Blackbeard, and he was just like, standing there menacingly, and Shanks and Buggy were like, that guy's a little weird. I don't think he slept that entire battle. There was like 3 days of battle where he never slept, all right? And there's a bunch of like references to this. Like, remember that reference way back in the day? I think it was Usopp, or maybe it was Luffy. They were talking about how people from snowy countries never sleep, because if they sleep, they'll freeze to death. So is Blackbeard from a snowy country? It's just, I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. I don't know if that's a, in the cover page, we had Yamato visiting that grave in Ringo, right? Okay. And there was a hero that was born in West Blue, but died in Ringo, was raised and died in Ringo. Could it have been Rox? I don't know if the people of Wano would have considered Rox a hero, but then again, I'm not sure. But he might have grown up and lived in Ringo, which is a snowy country. I don't know. Okay. So, at any rate, there's clearly something abnormal with Blackbeard's body, and that would also extend to Rox D. XEBEC. I've heard some people kind of being upset, maybe not just in the way that it was revealed, like in parentheses at the bottom of a chapter panel of just like, oh, by the way, he's also the dad of Blackbeard. But also, it's just like, you don't want everybody in One Piece related to everybody else. Like, not everything has to be, like, bloodlines and stuff. In this case, I would say yes, it's okay to do that, just because, like, whatever there is going on with Blackbeard's body and why he's different and why he's able to consume more than one devil fruits and doesn't need to sleep and all that kind of jazz, if that is like a genetic thing that's passed down, then it would make sense for him to be the son of Roxy XEBEC, who would also have that ability. Does Roxy XEBEC have a devil fruit power? I would assume he does. What does he have? Does he have the Yami Yami no Mi? And maybe eventually, because I don't think Blackbeard knew when he was a child that his dad was XEBEC. All right, and we'll get to that in a moment here, exactly what Blackbeard's childhood might have been like, you know, before he ended up joining the Whitebeard crew and all that. Does he have the Op fruit? A lot of people have been saying Op fruit. I don't know, okay? But wouldn't it be interesting if, yes, we have these two different parallels in One Piece, at least in terms of Luffy and Blackbeard, right? When Luffy and Blackbeard first met, we got to see that they were different, but they were also similar, all right? And Oda, you know, showcased that in a very brilliant way, I think, through the use of food and, like, the juice that they were having, you know? So Luffy really liked the juice, but Blackbeard hated it, and Luffy really hated the cherry pie, but Blackbeard loved it, you know? And so that parallel of, like, you know, they are similar. They both have the will of D. They, you know, we're talking a little bit there, and then, you know, of course, eventually, Blackbeard says, you know, the age where pirates' dreams will never end. And that doesn't seem like something really, well, it kind of does, because Luffy's like, well, no, I don't want to keep chasing dreams forever. Eventually, Luffy wants to find the One Piece, and, you know, that's the end of his dream. There is an end. There is a finite finish line for Luffy's dream, and he even says as much before Egghead to the rest of the crew when he tells them his dream, and he says, that's what I want at the end of my dream, okay? Meanwhile, Blackbeard is like, dreams will never end. I'm going to chase after them forever, okay? But overall, you could see the similarities there between the characters. So, they're both members of the Will of D. Way back during the Void Century, there was a clan of D that the progenitor of was probably Joy Boy. All right. So what if, this is actually a really cool thing if Oda does this. What if there is a strict bloodline that does get passed down? So Blackbeard's, like, he can trace his lineage all the way back to the Void Century, like great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was an original member of the Clan of D and fought in this big war during the Void Century alongside Joy Boy, okay? And so what if that line was like, dreams will never end, we'll eventually rise up and we'll defeat the world government, and then that just got passed down again and again and again through the lineage, okay? Unbroken. Then you have, like, Luffy's family, where maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe it wasn't like an unbroken chain, like Luffy's great-great-great-great-great-great whatever grandfather fought in the Void Century. No, it was more about inherited will. It was more about, like maybe the monkey family wasn't even involved in that way back then. It was just like the same thing with Shanks. You know, Shanks and Luffy are not biologically related. At least I don't think so. It turns out Luffy is actually Shanks' child the entire time. Luffy still has a deadbeat dad. Don't worry about that. It's just a different kind of deadbeat dad. No, Luffy and Shanks are not related. Luffy and Roger are not related. Okay, there's not that going on. But Shanks passed down that will, that hat, to Luffy. So it could have been just through the eras, you know, through the, we don't know where Roger got the hat. We see Roger wearing the hat before Shanks and before Luffy, but Roger could have gotten the hat for from somebody else, right? You know, and that hat could have been passed down through hundreds of years, and it's just like, oh, Goldie Roger, you will now be the next inheritor of the Will of D. And then Goldie Roger grew up and be like, Shanks, it is now, I'm passing it to you. No biological connection whatsoever, but you are the one inheriting that. And then Shanks, same thing with Luffy. He's like, hey, we're not related, but this is you. Here we go. I believe in you now. There, yeah. So it could be something like that. Two parallels. One through strict family lines of ties of blood, and then another one through just inheritance of that will to the next person, all right? And it would be so crazy if the Will of D that was passed down through Blackbeard's family and Rox's family ended up maybe getting corrupted, or somewhat like, oh, we need to be kings of the world and rule it all, like, because that seems to be Rox's overall goal. And it might also explain how they know about this stuff, right? So it was explained that Rox was at Reverie 56 years ago, okay? He killed an admiral, and then he fled. So how did he get to Reverie? What was going on there? Did he attack the Reverie? Did he sneak in? Like, what was going on with that? And Rox has always been stated by Sengoku to want to be king of the world, right? Well, Emu is the king of the world. So what if through that unbroken chain, Blackbeard and XEBEC, they know more about the Will of D than people like Luffy or Law or Saul would know about the Will of D. It was mentioned by Saul that when his parents gave him that initial, they didn't even know what it meant. At that point, it had long since been forgotten. What if Blackbeard and Rox, they knew because the family lineage and everything was passed down enough? I don't know, maybe Rox left something behind, like a journal or something, because eventually Blackbeard would learn about his father. But yeah, that's the interesting thing. Like, Rox knew there is a king of the world, their name is Emu, information nobody else is supposed to know. And so he attacked Reverie for that reason, ended up killing an admiral, had to flee, something else happened, eventually God Valley happened, and who knows what's up with Rox right now. So moving on to Blackbeard, right? Blackbeard was born 40 years ago. All right, so he was 2 years old when God Valley happened. I'm just going to go off on a limb here. Roxy XEBEC doesn't seem like the kind of guy that was going to take care of a baby. All right, he doesn't seem like, he's like, oh, my son, yes, I care about you. No, okay, we do not know who the mother of Blackbeard was, and we also, very importantly, do not know how many children that Rox ended up having. You know, that's another thing. Maybe the reason Oda just threw it in there, like father of Blackbeard in parentheses, was to kind of be like, oh, there you go, I've revealed it. Blackbeard's father is Roxy XEBEC. No more mysteries here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying Rox had at least 5 kids. I'm going with 5, all right? One of which could have been Buggy. This, by the way, with Rox's character, it's very interesting to see what his hair color is going to be, right? Like in the manga, it's like white hair with like black stripes or black hair with white stripes, whichever. But it's going to be really interesting when we see like maybe the Tankobon covers or eventually the anime, because people have been saying like, oh, what if he's also Buggy's father, so he has blue and black hair or something like that. It's like, maybe. It's very possible, very possible. What if Blackbeard at a certain point was like, he pulls a Dobby and was like, I was dyeing my hair the entire time, Zeha! And he, like, you know, pulls the dye, you know, rinses the dye out of his hair, and it's the same hair as Rox with the stripes through it, and just like, you know, I fooled you all, you know, I actually am Rox's son. And then everybody that, like Garp is like there, and he's like, Garp's like, yeah, I knew that, obviously, you look just like the guy. It's like, oh, all right. So anyway, Blackbeard was born, and then God Valley happened shortly thereafter. Blackbeard grew up as an orphan. He said as much when Whitebeard's crew eventually arrived at that port town, and he was just like, oh, do you have anywhere to go? And he's like, no, I'm an orphan. I want to go with you. And then Whitebeard's like, all right, what's your name? And he says, Teach. And then Whitebeard's like, all right, get on board, right? And then that's how Blackbeard joined the Whitebeard crew. Now, when did this occur? Well, we don't know the exact year, but we know that Odin was on the ship when it happened, okay? So Odin joined the Whitebeard crew 30 years ago, and then he left the Whitebeard crew to go with Roger's crew for their final voyage 26 years ago. So that gives us a 4-year window between when Blackbeard would have been 10 and 14. I don't think it happened the same year Odin joined, because the way that flashback was kind of structured was Odin was sort of like, oh, okay, here's all the adventures that we had with the Whitebeard crew. Also, occasionally some people would join, and then that's where we get the scene with Marshall D. Teach, okay? So, you know, it might have been like a few years after Odin joined or something. That's when Blackbeard joined, okay? So at that point, he already had the name Marshall D. Teach. Many people have brought up, I completely, you know, missed this possibility, but like same kind of deal with Ace, okay? So Porcus D. Rouge was Ace's mother, Goldie Roger was Ace's father, and Ace did not like his father, so he took the name Porcus instead, and Ace was the name, it was the name I think that Roger and Rouge had worked together. Considering the fact that Roger's sword was named Ace, I'm assuming he's the one that came up with that. Yarg me hearty, I be having a child. If it be a son, I name him Ace after me trusty sword. If it be a girl, then Actually, that's a fun trivia question for everybody. I know the answer, but what was the name that Ace would have been named if he was born a girl? There you go. There's actually, it is stated, both of them are mentioned by Rouge, okay? But anyway, that's how Ace got the name Porcus D. Ace. Okay, great, fantastic. Now, something similar with Blackbeard, maybe, where Roxy XEBEC's, I hesitate to say wife, but Blackbeard's mom, okay? Blackbeard's mom might have been named with the family named Marshall. Okay, and then the last name maybe she gave Teach, or the given name, because the way that names work in Japanese, so their family name would be Marshall, and then the Will of D, and then the given name would be Teach. So it could have been as simple as that. It could have been as simple as just Roxy XEBEC. It's just like, oh, you're having a kid. All right, you name him. I don't give a shit. And then I gotta go do pirate things. I gotta go start a rough and tumble pirate crew. Think I'll call them the Rocks Pirates. So maybe he just didn't give a shit, and Blackbeard's mom named him. And also the idea, now there is also another idea here where, considering at this point, Rocks was already like a very wanted man. He was yet the pirate captain of the Rocks crew. It seems like the Rocks crew was founded, and it was mentioned by Sengoku. I went back and checked. He said they were founded over one money-making scheme. So maybe the Rocks Pirates were formed for like only a little while, and then God Valley happened. Like, they weren't around in the ocean for years and years. Like Rocks was, and Whitebeard was, and like Big Mom was, certainly, but the Rocks Pirates as like a crew only existed for maybe a year or so. Like, it wasn't very particularly long, okay, before God Valley occurred, right? So what if, though, Rocks actually did give a shit about his son? It seems against his personality, but who knows? Especially if we're getting into the idea of like multiple souls being involved here, right? He has one personality that's really like, crass and just rough, and just be like, hey there, kid, tell me if Harold's here. If not, I'm gonna start murdering people, And then there's another side to him where it's like, well, you're my son. I don't want you being, hunted by the world government and shit, so I'm gonna give you a different name. Maybe. It might have not have been out of love. It might have been out of just like, oh, we have a mission to carry out. We are the bearers of the Will of D. We're the only clan that remembers what the Will of D really means. So I'm going to make sure that my son doesn't have the same name as me. Well, he still has the Will of D, but I'm not going to name him with the family name Rocks. I'm going to give him a different family name, or give him the family name of his mother or something, right? And that's how that kind of went. Maybe Rocks actually cared. Who knows? Like, it might be something similar to Dragon, when Dragon was talking to Kuma, and he says, a parent's child is their weak point kind of thing, right? So, who knows? Maybe Rocks actually cared. Maybe he didn't. But at some point, Rocks is no longer around, post-God Valley. Maybe he's still alive, maybe he isn't, but he definitely wasn't around for Blackbeard's upbringing, right? And at the point that Whitebeard showed up, he was an orphan. So somebody had to take care of Blackbeard when he was a little baby. Somebody had to. But maybe they would have died, or, he ran away, or something happened, or maybe somebody learned that he was the son of Rocks and then murdered his adoptive mother or whoever was taking care of him, and he was just running from town to town, sleeping very lonely under the moon and crying, as Oda depicted him in this image here, when he drew all the warlords as children, right? And then eventually, maybe around like age 12, he ends up on Whitebeard's crew, okay? Now, here's something interesting. Whitebeard would have 100% knew that Teach was Rocks' son. Like, that's not even a question. They look almost exactly the same. They have a lot of the same identifying facial features and things like that. Those, like, marks on the side of their eyes and everything like that. Like, there's simply no way that Whitebeard wouldn't have known. However, Whitebeard, very clearly, he's all about the found family and stuff. It's not about, your blood. It's about the bonds you forge, with your found family, right? Your friends and your nakama and stuff like that, right? Very similar to the way the Straw Hats, behave. And Oda even said, like, oh yeah, if the Straw Hats were a family, like Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper would be like the brothers, and Nami would be the sister, Robin's the mom. Frankie used to be the dad, but now Jinbei's the dad, and Frankie is now the pervy granny. So there we go. And Brooks the grandfather, right? Okay, and so that's like the whole idea there. Usopp, I think I didn't mention Usopp. Usopp's also one of the brothers, right? Okay, so it's like a family thing. Same thing with Whitebeard, okay? So there was a scene where Ace and Whitebeard were talking, and Ace brought up that his dad was Roger. Whitebeard kind of responded with like ambivalence. He was just like, oh, all right. That's a fun little, like, trivia fact, but, like, what does it matter, right? Like, he doesn't, you're not actually Roger. You're his son. You're your own person, right? And my God, how long Ace would have probably been waiting to hear somebody say that to him. Like, it's like, you don't have to be like your father. You're a different person. You are you, right? Okay. So Whitebeard's not the kind of guy, I don't think anybody on his crew, Whitebeard would go up to and be like, who is your biological parents? Because he just doesn't give a shit. He just doesn't care, right? So he would have known, certainly. I don't even think it's out of, like, some people have brought up maybe out of obligation, right? Like, he used to travel around with Rocks, and so, because Rocks died maybe at God Valley, maybe if he isn't dead at God Valley, maybe Whitebeard at least thought he was dead, right? Maybe Rocks stayed behind, everybody else abandoned him, Rocks stayed behind to fight Roger and Garp, 2-on-1, and then he died, or that was the story that he died, and then Whitebeard's like, well, whatever, he was a dumbass that got himself killed. It was going to happen at some point, right? So I don't think it was out of obligation. I don't think it was like, well, I kind of feel bad for Rox's son, he's not really at fault here. It wouldn't have really mattered who it was. They roll up to a port town and they see a sad orphan that's like, please let me journey with you. And then Whitebeard would have been like, all right, get on the ship, because that's literally what he does. Same thing with Marco. Marco, I'm pretty sure, was also an orphan that ended up on the crew as well, and a lot of the other members, okay? So it's not really about like, oh, you're Rox's son. Okay, well, I'm obligated to take care of you. Also, Whitebeard did not seem to give a shit about Rox very much. It's not like they were best friends and drinking buddies, It's just like, he seemed like, all right, maybe he followed him for the sake of, like, maybe he lost a Davy back fight or some other law or rule or something on Hachinosu, and he went along with it. But other than that, yeah, very clearly, they didn't really care about one another, all right, in that capacity, in the same way that, like, even Whitebeard and Roger seem to have more of a friendship than Whitebeard and Rox did, okay? So why did Whitebeard allow Ace to go after Blackbeard? Well, it was definitely an error on Whitebeard's part. He did make a mistake there. The way that he talked about it, especially when Shanks showed up, was like, hey, one of my children is dead, and what am I supposed to say to the soul, to the grave of my crewmate, of my son, Thatch? We need to, like, bring justice to Teach. We need to bring justice to him. And Ace was the one that left. I think it was more about, like, Whitebeard just, like, he couldn't bring himself to go to Ace and be like, Ace, you don't have to follow Blackbeard anymore. You don't have to do that. No, it's like, it's Whitebeard's principles, where in one way, they're really good because he helped a bunch of the orphans and, gave them a home. And he also helped his hometown, Sphinx. But maybe sometimes he was maybe just a little bit too stubborn, and he was a little bit like, well, one of my children got murdered by another one. We need to teach him a lesson. Ace is going to go out there. Okay, that's what we're doing. I can't call him back now because this is personal, right? Like, but he could have. He totally could have. Whitebeard could have totally have contacted him and said, hey, Ace, you don't need to follow him anymore. It's like, but Pops, he killed our brother. He killed Thatch. It's like, I know, but we'll deal with it some other way. Come back home. He could have done that, but I think it's more of just about Whitebeard's principles that he's just like, no, I can't do that, right? And so, yeah, I mean, eventually that did result in Ace getting captured. It did result in him getting thrown in Impel Down, which resulted in him going to Marineford, which resulted in him getting turned into a donut by Akainu. If Whitebeard would have called him back, that never would have happened, but it's like, well, that's the pirate code, I guess. You might think it's kind of stupid. I sort of do too sometimes, but like, hey, that's where we're at, okay? Who else would have known? We did a live stream yesterday where we were talking about that. Like, who else would have known that Blackbeard was Roxy XEBEC's son? Anybody that would have fought Rox directly and would have had a lot of dealings with him would have known. The Gorosei and Emu probably know because of just how ancient they all are. Sengoku knows. Garp would know definitely. Roger would have known. Rayleigh probably knows. Rayleigh would probably be able to connect the dots, and that might be why he was like a little leery about fighting Blackbeard at Amazon Lily. You know, he'd just be like, okay, I'm going to go and try to help and use my reputation as the Dark King to kind of like scare them off and everything, which did work, but Rayleigh was also very honest in saying that, like, yeah, I don't think I could take him now. And I don't think that was just because, like, well, I'm 78 years old and Blackbeard is a spry 40 years old, therefore I wouldn't be able to win. No, I think it's because Rayleigh would know, yeah, that's the son of Rox, and Rox was pretty damn strong, so his son's probably pretty damn strong too, especially he's got 2 devil fruits now, so... oh, boy, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. So Rayleigh would definitely know. Any of those old-timers would definitely know. Oh, Suru probably knows. Oh, by the way, somebody actually mentioned in a live stream when we were doing that, that Sengoku and Garp actually joined the Marines the same year that reverie occurred where Rox murdered an admiral. So that might actually be the impetus for why Garp and Sengoku, and I think Osuru as well, I think they all joined at the same time, all signed up for the Marines. That's all lining up in the timelines here. That's something really fascinating to me. So very much like how Porcus ended up being a relevant name, and that was kind of the way we learned about Porcus de Rouge, probably going to be the same thing with Blackbeard. But wouldn't it be a fascinating story that was the flip of Ace, where Ace rejected his father but accepted his mother? What if it's the opposite with Blackbeard? Blackbeard rejected his mother and accepted his father instead. Wouldn't it be, oh, this is so messed up, but like, so what if Blackbeard was essentially, like, you could either say his biological mother, or you could say just an adoptive mother. Either way, doesn't matter. After the events of God Valley, when Blackbeard was still like 2, he gets taken in by a person, right? And maybe that person gives him the name Marshall D. Teach. Maybe she still knew about, I mean, if it was Blackbeard's biological mom, then I guess she would know about Rox and know about the Will of D and make sure to include that in the name. Or maybe Rox told her to make sure to include that in the name or something like that, right? Okay. So what if, though, Blackbeard was raised in a nice, nurturing, you know, like family environment? There was sketch art of like what Blackbeard's mother would look like, and he had sisters. What if Oda makes that canon and Blackbeard did grow up in a perfectly fine like household, right? Like it was safe. There was no drama. There was nothing crazy going on. It was just like that was his life. And then he maybe learned about XEBEC a little later. Maybe he knew about XEBEC before he even joined Whitebeard's crew. And he was like, no, I'm going to follow my father's footsteps. And he willfully abandons his mother and sisters, or maybe, like, kills them. I mean, like, I don't know. Especially if we're going with the idea that, like, there's multiple souls in his body. So, like, if Rox's soul lives on, what if Blackbeard's like, I'm having a happy family dinner with my mom and my sisters, and everything is great. This is awesome. Nothing bad will ever happen. And then, like, Rox's soul takes over. Like, no, you have to go out to sea and be a pirate, my boy. Go out there. This is bullshit. And he's like, okay, Dad. And then he's like, ah! And then he just goes out to sea. Like, I'm an orphan. Please accept me on your ship. First thing you need to do, you need to find the Yami Yami no Mi now. It's like, okay, voice inside my head. You know, like, that would actually be terrifying. But it also kind of fits with, like, Blackbeard's weird body, and he doesn't sleep and stuff like that. He's tormented by the voices of his father speaking to him from beyond the grave. I mean, hey, we have to keep, like, Oda has to keep coming up with new and original backstories for these characters. We're getting Loki's sad crybaby backstory right now. What was Blackbeard's sad crybaby backstory? Maybe he murdered his family and then he went out to sea to go and carry on his father's legacy. The exact opposite of what Ace wanted. There you go. Yeah, still a lot to discuss, still a lot of stuff to go through, like all these things with Blackbeard and especially XEBEC and his powers and abilities. We'll probably tackle a video more focused all around him next, and the reverie that King Harald was at, and the admiral that was killed, and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, this is certainly a heavy chapter and a lot of stuff to unpack. So thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching 101 signing out. Later.